There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes something profound. Her heart is not a toy, her emotions are not a playground, and her worth is not up for negotiation. Pain has a way of revealing truths we often ignore. It exposes where we gave too much, where we tolerated what we should have rejected, and where we allowed someone else's behavior to dictate how we see ourselves. But today, this moment, this space is not about the hurt, it is about the awakening that follows it. When someone's actions cut deep, most women react from emotion, and that is natural, because you feel strongly, you care deeply, and you love wholeheartedly. But there is another way, a way that shifts the dynamic entirely, a way that stops you from being predictable, stops you from chasing answers you already know, and stops you from pouring energy into someone who did not value it. This is where your power begins. Confusing someone after they've wounded your heart does not mean playing childish games. It does not mean acting out of spite or revenge. It means understanding the psychology of value. It means reclaiming your emotional center. It means choosing responses that elevate you rather than drain you. Because the moment you switch from emotional reaction to intentional action, everything changes. The control shifts, the energy shifts, the dynamic shifts. People expect you to break down. They expect you to beg for clarity. They expect you to question what you did wrong. They expect you to fall apart under the weight of disappointment. But what they do not expect, what completely disorients them, is the moment you become calm, centered, unbothered, and mysteriously silent. Silence is confusing because it forces reflection. Calmness is confusing because it cannot be manipulated. Emotional stability is confusing because it shows strength where weakness was anticipated. And that is where your transformation begins. When the hurt no longer defines you, when the situation no longer controls you, and when you rise into a version of yourself that no longer seeks validation, explanation, or closure, in this space you learn the art of detachment, not coldness, not bitterness, detachment. The ability to hold your peace without losing your power, the ability to protect your heart without hardening it, the ability to walk away without collapsing, the ability to say nothing and yet communicate everything. When your energy shifts, so does the entire dynamic. This introduction is your reminder that your response can be your strength, your silence can be your strategy, your boundaries can be your transformation. And your self-respect can be the most confusing message you ever send. Because when someone expects you to fall apart and instead you rise, nothing is more powerful, nothing is more surprising, and nothing is more confusing than that. Let's step into that power. Silence is one of the most underestimated tools a person can possess, especially in moments of hurt, betrayal, or conflict. When someone expects a reaction, an argument, a tear, a message, a call, or a confrontation, silence becomes more than just the absence of words. It becomes a statement in itself. It is a deliberate choice that signals control, maturity, and strength. It communicates more than any outburst or explanation ever could. Silence does not mean weakness. It does not indicate confusion. It does not show indecision. It is, in fact, the strongest psychological shift a person can create because it forces others to confront themselves and the consequences of their actions in a way that words cannot. When someone has hurt you, the natural impulse is often to speak, to explain, to justify, or to defend your emotions. That is human. We want acknowledgement, validation, and understanding. We want the other person to see the pain they caused and to feel remorse. But in truth, this reaction often gives power to the one who hurt us because they get to witness our vulnerability, they get to manipulate the narrative, and they get to feel control over our emotional state. Silence changes all of that. It removes the emotional fuel from the fire. It shifts the energy away from them and centers it entirely on you. Silence is a language of its own, one that is hard to ignore. It challenges the expectation of reaction, which is why it is so confusing. When someone expects a response and receives none, it triggers introspection. They are forced to fill the void with their own thoughts, their own guilt, their own doubts. Silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back the reality of the situation and making them confront the behavior they thought they could get away with. The absence of words carries a weight that forces reflection and can unsettle even the most confident person. There is a difference between silence born of avoidance and silence born of strategy. Avoidance is passive, reactive, and often temporary. It is the kind of silence where someone hides from the situation, hoping it will go away, but it leaves the emotions unresolved and the power dynamic unchanged. Strategic silence, however, is active, deliberate, and transformative. It is a conscious decision to withhold reaction, to protect your energy, and to maintain your dignity. This kind of silence demonstrates emotional intelligence, self-control, and confidence. It is not about playing games, it is about showing strength without aggression. When silence is used strategically, it can communicate volumes without saying a single word. A calm, quiet presence communicates composure and maturity. It signals that your inner peace is intact, that you are not at the mercy of the situation, and that you will not allow external chaos to dictate your state of mind. It demonstrates that you are in control of your emotions and that you understand the value of self-restraint. This is a shift that cannot be faked or easily countered. Silence also protects your mental space. When you react impulsively, your mind becomes entangled in the drama, the anger, and the pain, which prolongs emotional suffering. By choosing silence, you create a buffer between the situation and your emotional well-being. You allow yourself the space to process without pressure, to think clearly, and to act intentionally rather than react out of hurt. This makes every future decision stronger and more aligned with your best interest. The psychological impact of silence extends beyond the person who caused harm. It affects everyone around you. People are drawn to those who possess calmness and composure, who do not act out of impulsive emotion, and who maintain an air of mystery. Silence exudes confidence because it suggests that you do not need constant validation or approval. It creates respect, admiration, and even a sense of unpredictability, because others never know exactly what your next move will be, and that uncertainty commands attention. Furthermore, silence encourages introspection in yourself. In moments when you are tempted to speak or react, remaining silent allows you to observe your own emotions, patterns, and triggers. It teaches patience, self-awareness, and discernment. You begin to understand the difference between reaction and response, between impulse and strategy, between emotion-driven decisions and intentional choices. Over time, silence becomes a form of empowerment because it is no longer just a tactic, it is a reflection of who you are and the control you have over your inner world. In essence, silence is more than Jill. Not speaking, it is an expression of self-mastery, resilience, and power. It creates a psychological shift because it removes the expected dynamic, it challenges others to reflect, and it preserves your energy and integrity. It is the most elegant way to demonstrate strength without confrontation and to communicate value without explanation. It is a tool that transforms vulnerability into power, chaos into composure, and reaction into strategy. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. Many think it means becoming cold, indifferent, or unfeeling. That is far from the truth. True emotional detachment is about clarity, control, and self-respect. It is the ability to observe situations, interactions, and even conflicts without allowing your emotions to dictate your actions or compromise your worth. Emotional detachment does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop over-investing in people, circumstances, or reactions that do not serve your highest good. It is a strategic approach to maintaining your power and preserving your peace, and it is one of the fastest ways to raise your value in the eyes of anyone who underestimates or undervalues you. When you are emotionally entangled, your energy becomes visible and predictable. People can sense when they have control over your reactions, your decisions, and even your happiness. Emotional attachment often leads to over-explaining, over-apologizing, or overcompensating, which unintentionally lowers your perceived value. It signals that your stability, confidence, and sense of self are contingent upon their actions, approval, or presence. Detachment, on the other hand, communicates the opposite. It signals independence, self-reliance, and strength. It says, without words, that your worth does not depend on anyone else's behavior. That alone shifts perceptions, changes dynamics, and commands respect. Detachment begins self-awareness. It requires understanding what truly matters and what does not. It involves recognizing situations that deserve your emotional energy versus those that are distractions or attempts to manipulate you. When you cultivate this awareness, you naturally begin to respond rather than react. You stop letting your emotions control the narrative. You stop giving power to the unpredictability or inconsistency of others. Emotional detachment allows you to step back, see the bigger picture, and make decisions from a place of strategy instead of impulse. One of the most immediate effects of emotional detachment is the way it shifts energy. People are accustomed to emotional reactions. They expect them, rely on them, and sometimes manipulate them. When someone no longer reacts in the way they anticipate, it disrupts their expectations. Detachment creates an aura of mystery and unpredictability. It forces people to reassess their assumptions about your vulnerability and your boundaries. It communicates that you are not easily swayed, manipulated, or controlled, and that your peace is non-negotiable. This subtle shift in energy often elevates how others perceive you, because strength and composure are inherently attractive and commanding qualities. Detachment also empowers decision-making. When you are not emotionally entangled, you make choices from clarity rather than chaos. You are able to prioritize your needs, desires, and boundaries without guilt or confusion. You are no longer reacting to what others want or expect. You are creating your own path based on what aligns with your values and goals. This independence sends a powerful message that your life, your happiness, and your energy are yours to manage, and no one else has permission to disrupt them without consequence. Another crucial aspect of emotional detachment is the preservation of self-respect. When you are fully aware of your value and refuse to overinvest emotionally, you set standards for how others can treat you. You communicate boundaries, not through arguments or ultimatums, but through your behavior, your calmness, and your refusal to compromise your dignity. Emotional detachment does not push people away out of fear or resentment. It naturally attracts those who respect, honor, and appreciate your presence and discourages those who would take advantage of it. Emotional detachment is not a one-time act, it is a practice. It requires consistency, self-reflection, and a commitment to personal growth. It involves observing triggers, understanding your patterns, and choosing responses that maintain your integrity. It is about being present without being consumed, involved without being dependent, and engaged without losing yourself. Every time you choose detachment over overreaction, you reinforce your values, solidify your boundaries, and strengthen your emotional resilience. Ultimately, emotional detachment raises your value instantly because it transforms how you are perceived and how you experience life. It turns vulnerability into strength, impulsiveness into strategy, and chaos into composure. When you detach, you gain control over your energy, your emotions, and your interactions. You stop giving power to situations that do not deserve it, and you begin to operate from a space of empowerment. Detachment is not apathy, it is mastery. It is the art of caring deeply without losing yourself, of engaging fully without being exploited, and of protecting your worth without hesitation. It changes everything because those who underestimated your strength begin to realize that you are untouchable in ways they never anticipated, that your heart and mind are not commodities to be manipulated, and that your energy is reserved for what truly matters. Emotional detachment is freedom, clarity, and power wrapped in one. Calmness is one of the most underestimated and misunderstood forms of power. In moments of conflict, hurt, or betrayal, the instinct is often to respond immediately, loudly, and emotionally. People expect anger, tears, frantic messages, or impulsive reactions because that is the predictable response. But there is a force far stronger than reactionary behavior, and it comes in the form of calm, measured responses. When someone expects an emotional explosion and receives composure instead, the entire dynamic shifts. Calm responses disrupt expectations, confuse assumptions, and communicate strength in a way that words or aggression never could. The beauty of calmness lies in its invisibility and its impact. It is quiet, yet it resonates powerfully. It is not passive, it is active. Being calm does not mean ignoring the situation, suppressing feelings, or pretending everything is fine. It means understanding the weight of your emotions, processing them internally, and choosing how to communicate in a manner that protects your energy and preserves your dignity. Calmness allows you to reclaim the narrative, to dictate the pace of the interaction, and to prevent others from controlling your emotional state. When people hurt or provoke you, their goal is often to elicit a reaction. They want to see anger, frustration, or heartbreak because those reactions give them attention, validation, or a sense of power. But a calm response interrupts that pattern. It denies them the satisfaction of control. It forces them to reconsider their assumptions about your vulnerability and your predictability. By responding with composure, you send a message without even speaking, that you are grounded, that you are aware, and that you will not allow your emotions to be exploited. The very act of remaining calm in situations where chaos is expected can be more confusing and more powerful than confrontation itself. Calmness also creates clarity. When emotions run high, judgment becomes clouded, decisions become reactive, and actions may later be regretted. By maintaining calm, you create the space to assess the situation with a clear mind. You can evaluate intentions, understand motivations, and consider the consequences of every response. This clarity allows for strategic choices that serve your long-term interests rather than short-term impulses. Every calm response is not just a display of control, it is a calculated decision to maintain power and self-respect. Another significant aspect of calmness is the way it shifts energy. Chaos demands energy to engage with, and reacting emotionally gives that energy away. By responding calmly, you retain your energy and redirect it toward your own priorities. Others may become frustrated, impatient, or confused because they no longer know how to manipulate or predict your reactions. This confusion is a natural byproduct of calmness, and it works to your advantage by establishing you as someone who cannot be swayed by drama or impulsive behavior. Calm responses also demonstrate emotional intelligence. They signal that you understand your emotions, recognize the emotional patterns of others, and can manage situations without succumbing to pressure. Emotional intelligence is magnetic because it shows strength, self-awareness, and maturity. People are drawn to those who remain composed, who do not overreact, and who can navigate tension without losing themselves. Calmness becomes a silent form of leadership, commanding respect and admiration without the need for loud assertions or aggressive displays. Strategic calmness also protects relationships and interactions. When you respond from anger or panic, misunderstandings escalate and bridges are often burned necessarily. Calm responses, however, provide space for communication, understanding, and resolution without sacrificing boundaries or self-respect. You maintain your integrity while still addressing the situation, ensuring that your actions align with your values and long-term goals. The psychological effect of calmness on the other person is profound. When someone expects a reaction and is met with composure, it forces introspection. They begin to question their actions, their approach, and the impact they have had. Calm responses disrupt the narrative that they are in control and create uncertainty where they expected predictability. This subtle shift can make them reevaluate their behavior and recognize the consequences of their actions in a way that emotional outbursts rarely achieve. Ultimately, calm responses are a demonstration of mastery over oneself. They transform vulnerability into strength, chaos into order, and unpredictability into influence. Calmness allows you to rise above provocation, preserve your energy, and communicate value without ever having to argue, justify, or over-explain. It is a skill that strengthens with practice, observation, and intentionality. By remaining calm, you signal to the world that you are unshakable, confident, and in control of your own life. Every interaction handled with calmness shifts the perception of who you are, elevates your presence, and increases the respect and attention you receive. People notice composure because it is rare, powerful, and transformative. It becomes a silent force, a psychological tool, and a subtle way of taking command without confrontation. Calmness disrupts the expected, confounds assumptions, and establishes you as someone who cannot be easily moved, manipulated, or diminished. Boundaries are one of the most powerful tools a person can use to protect their energy, maintain their dignity, and elevate their self-worth. Yet so often people underestimate their impact, believing that explanations, justifications, or repeated clarifications are the only way to communicate their needs, values, or limits. The truth is, boundaries speak louder than any words ever could. They are not just rules for others. They are a reflection of self-respect, self-awareness, and self-control. They are a declaration of what is acceptable in your life, and they communicate more about your value than any long conversation or emotional appeal ever could. Setting boundaries begins with understanding your own worth. When you recognize that your time, energy, and emotions are precious, you naturally develop a framework for how they should be treated. Boundaries are not punishments for others. They are protection for yourself. They show that you will not tolerate behaviors, actions, or patterns that diminish your peace or compromise your integrity. Every boundary set, whether explicit or implicit, communicates strength because it signals that you are unwilling to sacrifice your well-being for someone else's comfort or convenience. One of the reasons boundaries are so effective is that they remove ambiguity. Explanations often invite debate, negotiation, or resistance. They can be dissected, challenged, or ignored. Boundaries, however, create clarity. They set the parameters of interaction, the limits of tolerance, and the expectations for behavior. When you enforce a boundary, you do not have to argue about it or justify it endlessly. Your actions, the decision to protect your time, your heart, or your peace, speak louder than any verbal explanation ever could. Boundaries make it clear that your value is non-negotiable and that you are in control of how you allow others to treat you. Boundaries also create psychological impact. People are conditioned to test limits, to push until they find what is permissible, and to take advantage of uncertainty. When you consistently enforce boundaries, you change the dynamic. You communicate that you are not easily manipulated, that you cannot be controlled through guilt or pressure, and that your respect and attention must be earned. This is inherently confusing to those who expected compliance or emotional vulnerability. By simply maintaining your limits, you establish power without aggression, respect without confrontation, and authority without the need for explanation. Another critical aspect of boundaries is that they foster emotional intelligence. When you establish and maintain boundaries, you demonstrate self-awareness, self-control, and the ability to manage relationships thoughtfully. You show that you understand the difference between what belongs to you and what belongs to others, and that you can protect your energy without being reactive or reactive-driven. Boundaries allow for conscious interactions, where communication is intentional, not impulsive, and where your presence is respected rather than taken for granted. Boundaries are also a form of nonverbal communication. They show people who you are and what you value without requiring constant explanation. Your behavior communicates as much as your words, and often more. If someone consistently respects your limits, they begin to recognize your value, your strength, and your principles. If someone repeatedly tests those boundaries, the response or lack thereof signals that certain behaviors will not be tolerated. In this way, boundaries act as both protection and teaching tools, guiding others on how to interact with you appropriately. Enforcing boundaries requires consistency. Inconsistency sends mixed signals and diminishes the power of what you are trying to communicate. Every time you allow a boundary to be crossed, even slightly, you undermine the clarity of your message and weaken the psychological impact. Consistency reinforces that your limits are non-negotiable, that your energy is not to be taken lightly, and that your self-respect is steadfast. This steadfastness commands attention, garners respect, and naturally elevates your presence in any relationship or environment. Boundaries also create space for personal growth. When you prioritize your needs and enforce limits, you protect the time and energy necessary for reflection, self-care, and progress. You are able to engage with life intentionally, choosing relationships, opportunities, and experiences that align with your values. This selective engagement increases your perceived value because it shows that you are intentional, purposeful, and in control of your life rather than reactive to the demands or expectations of others. The true power of boundaries lies in their ability to communicate without debate, to protect without aggression, and to elevate without boasting. They are a silent form of empowerment, signaling to the world that your presence, time, and emotions are valuable and must be treated with respect. Boundaries do not require justification or persuasion. They are understood through action, consistency, and firmness. In every interaction, boundary setting is an act of self-assertion. It demonstrates awareness of your worth and the standards you uphold. Boundaries force reflection in others because they challenge assumptions, highlight self-control, and demand respect. They establish a framework where your value is clear, where your peace is prioritized, and where your power remains intact. By prioritizing boundaries over endless explanations, you convey a message of strength, clarity, and self-respect that words alone could never fully express. Self-respect is the foundation of all power, influence, and dignity. It is the quiet force that commands attention, the invisible shield that protects your energy, and the internal compass that guides every decision you make. When someone underestimates you, hurts you, or tries to manipulate you, the most disorienting response they can encounter is not anger, not confrontation, and not desperation. It is self-respect. It is the calm, unwavering understanding that you will not compromise your standards, values, or boundaries for anyone. Self-respect is inherently powerful because it cannot be argued with, bargained with, or broken through external pressure. It is silent, subtle, and yet profoundly impactful. At its core, self-respect is an acknowledgement of your own worth. It is the recognition that you are entitled to dignity, love, and fair treatment, and that no one's behavior should redefine how you view yourself. When you carry this awareness, your actions automatically reflect it. You make decisions that prioritize your well-being. You walk away from situations that diminish you. You protect your energy as fiercely as you would guard a treasure. This internal alignment sends a message louder than any words ever could, that your value is inherent, non-negotiable, and untouchable. What makes self-respect so confusing to others is that it disrupts expectations. Many people anticipate certain reactions when they hurt, betray, or challenge someone. They expect guilt, apologies, tears, explanations, or emotional dependency. They assume that their behavior will provoke a predictable response that can be manipulated or controlled. But self-respect overturns all of that. When you respond to harm or manipulation with calm dignity, when you refuse to over-explain or overreact, the other person is forced to confront their own behavior without having any control over your emotional state. This unpredictability is disorienting because they cannot apply the usual patterns of influence or coercion. Self-respect also communicates strength without aggression. It is not about dominating others or retaliating. It is about demonstrating that you will not allow anyone to erode your integrity or compromise your peace. When you maintain self-respect, you assert authority over your own life, choices, and emotions. Your calm composure and unwavering standards signal that you are untouchable in ways that anger or confrontation cannot achieve. People who attempt to provoke you are left confused because the power dynamic has shifted completely. They no longer hold influence over your energy or your reactions. The impact of self-respect extends beyond external interactions. It transforms the way you see yourself. When you act from a place of dignity, you reinforce your own confidence, self-worth, and emotional stability. Every choice you make in alignment with your values strengthens your identity and deepens your sense of empowerment. You stop seeking validation from others because your approval is inherent. You understand your own value and no longer rely on external acknowledgement to feel complete or justified. This inner strength becomes a magnetic force that attracts respect, admiration, and alignment in all areas of your life. Self-respect also acts as a protective mechanism. It establishes non-negotiable boundaries that communicate what is acceptable and what is not. These boundaries do not require argumentation or justification. They are self-evident in the way you carry yourself, the decisions you make, and the standards you uphold. When someone encounters this, they are confronted with the reality that you will not tolerate manipulation, disrespect, or exploitation. Your actions alone reinforce your value, making words almost unnecessary. The most powerful aspect of self-respect is that it is inherently non-reactive. It does not rely on the behavior of others for validation or confirmation. It exists independently of external circumstances, which makes it untouchable and enduring. When you maintain self-respect, you are not swayed by criticism, disappointment, or attempts at provocation. You remain grounded, confident, and unshakable. This constancy creates a psychological shift in others because it defies their expectations and challenges their assumptions about control and influence. Self-respect also teaches restraint and intentionality. It allows you to choose responses, interactions, and engagements that align with your highest good. You do not react impulsively out of emotion, fear, or anger. Instead, you act from a space of clarity, discernment, and strategic awareness. Every decision, every step, and every boundary is a reflection of your self-worth. This level of intentionality is both powerful and confusing to those who underestimate the strength of a person who knows their value. Ultimately, self-respect is a comeback that cannot be measured in words, revenge, or displays of anger. It is quiet, deliberate, and magnetic. It communicates that your value is inherent, your dignity is non-negotiable, and your peace is inviolable. Self-respect turns vulnerability into strength, chaos into composure, and challenge into opportunity. It is the most disarming, confusing, and powerful response to hurt, manipulation, or underestimation. It signals to the world that you operate from a place of authority over your own life, that your standards are unwavering, and that your worth cannot be diminished by anyone's actions. When you carry yourself with self-respect, everything changes. Your energy, your presence, and your influence are elevated. People recognize your strength, sometimes before they even understand it. Your calm, confident demeanor, your boundaries, and your unshakable standards communicate more than explanations ever could. Self-respect is transformative because it does not seek to explain, argue, or justify. It simply exists, and in that existence lies the ultimate power and the most confusing comeback anyone can face.